Hello, my friends. Happy Sunday. So good to see you. Hope you've had a wonderful week. Hey, we started a brand new unit last week, right? And it's called Exodus. It's the book of the Bible, number 2, that comes after Genesis. Then there's Exodus. So we are moving along in this book. And I hope if you missed the story last week, I hope you'll go back on our YouTube channel and just kind of check it out so you make sure you're hearing all the information. But to give you a quick review, the Israelites were in the land of Egypt. And you might even be able to hear some of the noise behind me, but the Israelites in Egypt, they were slaves and they were builders, all right? The Pharaoh at that time had them building big, giant palaces and castles and, not castles, palaces and things. And so they were there as slaves to build and build and build. Kind of looks a little bit like Nashville right now, right? Building and building and building. But let's go back. Pharaoh, there were so many Israelites. Do you guys remember when Abraham was told you'll have as many descendants as the stars in the sky? Yep, that is true. And so Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all those sons. So this is much later. And the people of Israel, the Israelites, were many. And Pharaoh started looking at all those people and saying, one day they could take over Egypt. So Pharaoh made a really bad decision. And he said, no more babies for the Israelites. So that's where our unit began, with Moses' mom having baby Moses and thinking, what am I going to do? So she hid him away for 3 months. But when he got so loud, finally she made a little basket, covered it in tar, put baby Moses in, and gave it to Miriam, his older sister, and said, send him down the river, and prayed that someone would find him. And who found him? Do you guys remember from last week? You're right. The princess. So here was Moses. He got to be raised in a palace, but for the first 4 years, where was he? Do you guys remember? For the first 4 years, his very own mom got to raise him. And so he got to learn about God. And so he had what we called the best of both worlds. He had the palace and all the riches of the best food, the best comforts, the best clothing, and he had his own mom to teach him about the one true God. So that's where we start our story. Baby Moses grew up. And so where did he live then? He lived in the palace. And he was about 40 years old. So he really grew up, right? And all the time he was there, he had the best education. He was treated like a prince. But one day he went out. And again, what were those Israelites, his people, doing? They were building. And when they were out there building, there was an Egyptian, and he was beating one of the Israelites. And it made Moses so angry that he went out and he actually killed him. In his anger, he killed this Egyptian who was being cruel to the Israelite man. And Moses, instead of facing the situation, just hid him in the sand. And then he thought, oh, what if Pharaoh finds out? So he ran away. Everybody ready to run, 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 run. Oh, he ran far. He ran all the way to the land of Midian, which was out in the desert. So he went from living in a palace to soon he was going to be living in a tent. So there was no building happening out there. He was living in a tent, but he was out and he gathered around the well. Do you guys remember? We've had several stories about the women gathering around the well, right? Well, here was Moses, and he was at the well, and 7 sisters showed up. And the 7 sisters were daughters of a man named Jethro. And those daughters came and they were finding water and pulling up water for their sheep. Jethro was a shepherd, and they were pulling up water for the sheep, and some kind of surly, mean shepherds came and pushed the girls out of the way so that they could get their own water. They treated those ladies very badly. And so Moses stepped in to protect them and help them get the water they needed for their sheep. So the girls got their water, they thanked him, and they went home to Jethro, their dad, and started telling him about Moses. And he said, why didn't you bring him back? Why didn't you bring him to meet me? And so the girls went back and they invited Moses to supper. And then Moses decided to stay, and he stayed for a long time out there. Matter of fact, he got married to one of those girls, and then he had 2 children with one of those girls, the same girl. And so so Moses was living out there with his wife. He lived out in the desert for many, many years. Now, you might think, again, he went from a palace to a tent, from the beauty of this beautiful city and all that Egypt had to offer, out to kind of a desert area being a shepherd. You might have thought he was felt a little defeated. But no, Moses knew God. And even in his days of feeling a little defeated, he knew that God was preparing him. Just like you and I know that sometimes there's times when we feel a little defeated. We feel like, what's happened? We look around our world right now. Maybe some of you guys have had to go into quarantine. Maybe some of you guys have gotten sick. Maybe some of you have heard things that are happening on the news right now. It's a very kind of sad time in our world. But God uses these times. Just like he's using these times for Moses, he'll use these times for us. And it was our time to grow. See how I sat in front of the grow today? Because that's our lesson. This was the time for Moses to grow. He wasn't going to just waste his time out there. He was going to become stronger in the Lord. God was preparing him. Again, God is preparing you, and God is preparing me. And in these times when we feel like we might be alone, it's our time to spend time with God. Do you guys have a place? Do you have a time when you spend time with God just all on your own? This was that time for Moses. And you know, we've talked about a lot of shepherds and who was the most famous shepherd we probably talked about? That's right, David. And then we talked about one shepherd who's not in the Bible, but we talked a lot about him back in March. Do you guys remember talking about St. Patrick? He was a shepherd for a long time, right? And that was the time he grew in the Lord. And he was becoming strong and spending time with God. And then, do you guys remember talking about some other Bible characters who had to be alone and go out? This one was very similar to Moses. Do you guys remember talking about Jacob? Yeah, Jacob had to run away because he had made a big mistake, kind of like Moses. Killing that Egyptian man, he was frightened and he had to run away. But there was God to meet him. So guys, I hope that you will learn from this story that when we do make mistakes, we need to talk to God. When we do feel defeated or a little bit lost, that could be our time of biggest growth. So I hope you'll spend some time with God this week. I hope you'll spend just some time alone. Ask him, how are you preparing me, God? How are you helping me grow in this time right now? And I hope you will come back next week and we're going to learn to see how God speaks to Moses firsthand. It's an exciting story. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.